Here's exactly how much I make on my apartment complex, and I'm not going to hold anything back. Look, I've been in this game long enough to know that most people only show you the upside, not the full picture. So in this video, I'm covering everything from monthly income to operating expenses, maintenance, and the real profit that hits my account. Now, I'm also going to show you how we turn this distressed property around from a money losing mess and the exact system and math behind making that actually happen. So in mid 2023, I bought a 144 unit apartment complex in Houston, Texas for $11.1 million. Now, this wasn't a clean turnkey asset. Literally, the physical occupancy was in the 70%, but the economic occupancy was in the 60s, which means that we had more people living there than people were actually paying tenants. So we had bad tenants, zero operational standards, and it was a real eyesore to the neighborhood. There was no access control, gates were broken, there was deferred maintenance, and the property was losing money when we bought it. So there wasn't really even a cap rate to calculate. It was just bleeding out. And that's actually exactly why I bought it. So here's how we turned it around. Step one, we'd locked down the property, we added security, fixed the gates, installed access control systems so good tenants could actually feel safe wanting to live there. Step two is we worked on the exterior. We updated the paint, the balconies, the landscaping, the signage. A lot of this stuff had never been touched since the 80s. Step three was laundry and interiors. So we redid the laundry room and we went by unit with the interiors, lighting, paint, new flooring. Step four was all about rebranding. We renamed the asset the Burke Apartments and we worked to rebuild the property's reputation from the ground up. So simple things like when you walked to the clubhouse, you were greeted, you were asked if you'd like something to drink, you were given a comfortable place to wait as you filled out the application. Before, when I walked in to buy this property and shit, I walked into the clubhouse, and there was a very distinct smell of a certain type of animal's urine in the waiting area, and on top of that, I was made felt like I was inconveniencing the people that worked there for asking them some questions. So we wanted to reposition how that property was seen in the community immediately. Here are the numbers when we took over. The one bedrooms were renting for $650. The two bedrooms were $950. Today, after all the work we were able to do and the quality of the tenants that we were able to bring in, the one bedrooms rent for about $1,000 plus utilities, and the two bedrooms are, I think they're about $1,500 or $1,600. So the total gross rental income today is about $155,000 with about a 96% stabilization on the property. So this is what like a strong value add looks like in action, because before the property was barely making half of that. The next thing that's important is your operating cost. So the 155,000 is gross, which is great, but that's not all profit. So what does it cost to run this building? Well, we're running at about a 45% operating expense ratio, which means property management, payroll, repairs and maintenance, insurance, admin fees, utilities, all of these different expenses that are incorporated into running a good property and maintaining it for the quality life that our tenants expect is costing us about, call it about $70,000 a month. So if you're still watching, this is where it starts to get good. And this is where most people trip up in this type of transaction. And it's actually where most of the margin comes from. See, post acquisition, we invested an additional $2.2 million into the property. About half of that went into paint, repairing the balconies, gates, signage, landscaping, and about half, the other half, went into the interior. We gutted some of the units, replaced the flooring, appliances. And the cool thing is the way we structured the deal is that a lot of that CapEx was also funded through our bridge loan, which also helped us with the acquisition. Now, the thing here is our bridge loan came with an interest only rate of about 10%, which was actually expensive. But listen, by doing the bridge loan initially, we were able to add a ton of value to the property, use someone else's money, the lender's money, and increase the value to a point where we knew we could do what's called a cash out refinance. Once we stabilized the asset, we refinanced into a fixed rate, fixed term loan with Fannie Mae. I think it was at a 5.25 or 5.35, and it was interest only for the first 2 years. Now, for context, the loan amount was $11.5 million, which was actually more than what we paid for the property out of the gate. Now, the monthly payment on that is about, call it $51,000. So let's do the math again. Again, we had $155,000 in gross income, $70,000 in operating expenses. That leaves $85,000 in net operating income. About $51,000 of that is debt service. So that leaves about $34,000 a month in free cash flow. Now, we set some of that aside as well, just in case anything else happens. And the rest of that goes out in the form of distributions to our investors. We pay that out quarterly, top it up annually, and make sure we have enough reserves to keep things running smoothly. So, what's it worth today? Well, the refinance appraisal that we did when we refinanced it came in at about 17.9. Realistically, if we sold it, we wouldn't let it go for less than 19 today. So we're all in for 13.3 million with the acquisition and the renovations, plus some other soft costs. So there's at least $5 or $6 million in equity there in that property that we were able to create in under 18 months. And here's the kicker. We were also able to return on investors nearly $2 million during that refinance without having to give up any equity because we bought it so well. When we did that cash out refinance, we were able to refinance our investors a good chunk of their investors' capital out and still retain the asset. Ownership stayed the same, cash flow continued, risk for the investor went down because they got a piece of their capital out. And that is ultimately the real way to add value in your investors' lives. People ask me, what kind of challenges do we typically come across with deals? Well, with this deal, we didn't really have any structural challenges where, for example, the plumbing was bad or the foundation was falling apart. It was mostly operational. So the hardest part here was actually managing out the bad tenants while we were in construction. So we had to also attract high quality tenants while changing the reputation of the entire property, which is why we rebranded the property, we reset expectations, and we had to rebuild that online perception because ultimately that was what was going to change the outcome for the property to attract that higher quality tenant. Now, a big lesson here for me was more of a reminder than a lesson is a good deal with a great team can outperform anything, even in a down market. Now, especially when you look around and there are properties within the Houston area that have dropped 20 to 40, 15% in equity where investors were essentially getting wiped out. Whereas during that same time, we managed to add, four, $6 million in equity to an asset, which is about a third of its value. So the question you might have is, okay, Marcin, so I understand how you added value to the asset, but how do you guys actually make fees and get paid? Well, the real answer here is, and this is where most people miss the boat, is the money isn't in the actual fees that you make up front. I mean, those are helpful. They pay the bills. But the real value is in the equity that you build on the back end. So in the short term, yeah, we do make fees for doing the work. For example, we charged a $330,000 acquisition fee upfront to source and close that deal. We charge an asset management fee. Typically on this property, I think it's $35,000 a year, which isn't major, but it's to manage the entire process. There's a project management fee during the renovation period. We charged, I think it was a 10% CapEx fee for overseeing all the improvements. And at some point, if we ever do end up selling the property, there'll be a fee there. But look, you don't get rich off fees. They do pay the bills because that work has to get done by someone. But the real upside is from owning the back end. So in our case, with this project, there's the LP, which are all the passive investors. I'm an LP as well. But then there's all the active investors, the general partners. They're the ones that do the work. So in this deal in particular, once our investors get their money back, we own 30% of the upside. So in other words, one day, if we were to sell the property, investors get all their money back, they get all their returns, and a third of the upside, about 30% of the upside is ours. And because we bought this as a distressed property, and we were able to add millions of dollars in value to this property, that 30% of the upside starts to really add up. Now, if you're new and you're looking at distressed assets, here's a few tips for you. Number one, don't pay retail to fix somebody else's problem. You should be paid to fix problems. I can tell you that with our last acquisition and many acquisitions like it, I've seen people in a state of distress trying to get retail pricing, essentially to hot potato their problem onto somebody else's lap. Don't do it. Next piece, as far as distressed properties, distressed assets are not beginner deals. Unless you're a team that's done this before, skip it. Another way to say it is don't do your first distress deal. Be part of 10 other people's distress deals first. Borrow the experience before you earn it the hard way. Now, know this deal didn't work out because I got lucky. It worked because we had the right team and we had the right structure and we had the right system in place to take a distressed deal, fix it, add value, and be able to pull millions in equity while still cash flowing. So if you're serious about doing this at scale, hit the subscribe button. I post weekly content for capital raisers, operators, founders, and builders looking to scale with systems. Make sure you also drop a comment if you want more real world breakdowns like this. And if you're working on your own raise or deal and you want help installing a proven capital raising system that gets you funded, check out my other business, M1 Inner Circle, and let's look at helping you build and get to the next level together.